Good evening. Thank you for joining and welcome to our LLM International Commercial Law webinar. My name is Jad Hardan and I'm the Director of Technology at AFG College. We're going to start now. You can type your questions in the Q&A section and our presenters will be answering at the end of the event. Thank you again for attending, and I will hand over now to Russell Williams, the Dean of the Qatar campus. Russell?
Thank you very much, Jad. Good evening, everybody. Again, welcome to the LLM International Commercial Law webinar. The outline or the agenda for this evening is that I'm going to start with a very brief introduction to the University of Aberdeen. I'm then going to hand over to our Director of Postgraduate Programs, Rulian, and he will outline how the LLM will be delivered here in Qatar. We then got our guest speaker, Professor John Patterson from the Law Department of the University of Aberdeen, and John will be teaching on the programme, and he's going to give a very short talk. He will give you a flavour of some of the things that you will encounter on the LLM programme. We're then going to have just a brief couple of slides on what next, how to complete your application and join the university. After all of that, I will run through some of the generic questions that we've had and sum them up and give some answers. We'll then go to any of the faculty who may have some observations at the end. So let's begin. My name is Russell Williams. I'm the Dean for the Qatar campus. I'm based here in Doha. Just a few facts then about the university. Hopefully you've done a bit of research, but we're very proud of one fact that's fairly prominent for us is that we were founded in 1495, and this year we're celebrating our 525th anniversary. And to mark this milestone, the university's been engaged in a lot of consultation with its stakeholders, that's students, staff, and all its constituents, which includes employers as well. And we've been trying to work out a vision for our future, something that says, what are we about and what are we striving to do, and how we're going to go about that in the run up to 2040. So I'm going to say a little bit about that 2040 vision so we can get a flavour of that. Now, don't worry, we're not planning on throwing everything away just because we've decided to do a revisioning exercise now. When we look back to the origins of the university, something that was prominent then is as prominent now and was mentioned by the founding fathers of the university, and that's the pursuit of truth in the service of others. So that maxim is going to remain at the heart of everything that the university does. But we're going to do that around some key themes. We're going to try and achieve this purpose around some key themes. And obviously, education and research are at the heart of what a university does. And for the University of Aberdeen, excellence in education and research is actually at the heart of what the university does. But it's not just research for research's sake. It's research that's targeted at transforming the world around us, making better lives and better organizations. So you'll find that many of the faculty that you would encounter on the program, they're engaged in practical research or research that has a practical impact. And maybe John can talk us through a bit of his research later in the evening. He's an expert on oil and gas legislation. So education, research, excellence, that's our maxim. And you'll discover that because the faculty that are in front of you are world-leading faculty. The university strives to recruit the best from wherever they come from on the planet. We also have a policy of inclusivity. We welcome and support individuals and students and partners from all backgrounds, organisations and communities. And that sort of mirrors really something about our international, intercultural perspective as well. The university is very international. It has 120 different nationalities studying on the campus in Aberdeen. The faculty in my own previous school, the business school, we had 40 different nationalities. Here in Doha, on the faculty in Doha, we've got many different nationalities, and likewise in the law school, we'll be coming to deliver the program to you. There are many different nationalities present there as well. So it's very international, and that's part of the experience that we want all of the students at the university to have. We're living in a globalized environment, and that's important. There's been a lot of debate as well recently about interdisciplinarity. And what does that mean? It means two subjects coming together and the product of the two subjects being greater than the individual parts. And this is something that the university is working on a lot. crossover between different schools. So in my former life in the business school, I worked extensively with Professor Patterson in the law school as an example of that. And with this interdisciplinary working, we're tackling, or we're looking to tackle as a university, some of the big interdisciplinary challenges that we face today, or maybe can only be solved through interdisciplinary work. And I'll say what 5 of those interdisciplinary challenges are in just a moment. So I've mentioned international, of course we're international, and the last sort of principal aim is that what we hope in everything we do, wherever we do it on the planet, we are understanding and nurturing of our environment, taking care of our people and looking after our resources. That's all important. We've got to live on this planet in the future, so that's a really important thing for the university. Those international, those sort of challenges of our time, what are they? I've just put a little diagram up here that illustrate them. Energy transition. Aberdeen has a lot in common with Doha. Aberdeen is the oil and gas capital of Europe, with many oil majors present in Aberdeen. And so that is the heart of what the university does. But we're not just a hydrocarbon-based university. As we recognise here as well, hydrocarbons will form a part of the energy mix, and we need to think about energy transition in production and consumption. And so that's part of what we're looking at in the university as well. Social inclusion and cultural diversity, that follows on from the international dimension that I mentioned earlier. International orientation, or a globalized planet, means challenges, but it also means opportunities. What we have to do is how to learn to manage and through this sort of opportunities and challenges. And some of that, of course, is understanding how the law and institutional arrangements can facilitate realizing some of these opportunities. The environment and biodiversity, that links back to our sort of nurturing and environmental maxim. A good example of interdisciplinarity is the position of data and artificial intelligence in the university. It is located in the School of Computing, but increasingly many of the other schools at the university are working with the School of Computing on how can they make use of the vast amounts of data that are being gathered. How can we process it, structure it, get the right information to the right people at the right time? So that's a core element for everybody in all different schools at the university now, very important. And the legacy for us is the final one: health, nutrition and well-being. We've had long established a nutrition orientation at the university. So this introduction is just about giving you a flavour for what the university is about. It's a world-leading university that strives to generate knowledge, insight, but importantly, deliver real impact around it. And a lot of that impact will be through you, the students, and our graduates as they go out and represent us and represent their own companies as managers and leaders. So I hope you find this evening informative and insightful. We're going to watch a short video, and then the talk will move on to Rulian Rattray, who'll say briefly something about the programme before we get to our expert, Professor John Patterson. So let's go to the video. Thank you very much, Jad.
These are challenging times. We can't pretend to have all the answers, but we have 525 years' experience of facing challenges, from war times to fighting cancers. In times of change, we come together. We find new ways of working, as resilient as ever. But this is about you, not about us. Whatever the circumstance, your learning comes first. We offer support from a community that cares, for nothing is more important than your welfare. Your learning, your life will still unfold, and together we'll make futures that are bright and bold. For now, we continue to adapt and work as a team, supporting the effort in the fight against COVID-19. So wherever you are and whenever you can join us, we will support you all the way. With warmest regards, the Aberdeen family.
Good evening and welcome everyone. Thank you, Russell, for the introduction to the university. I'm going to talk a little bit, as Russell indicated, about the LLM, but I'm going to focus in particular on what your study will be like and what we expect of postgraduate students and how we support you. So my name is Thomas Rulian, a slightly unusual Scottish name. Every Scottish name with a Z in, the Z is actually a yog, a Y. So mine is no different. So the Z is actually a Y, Rulian. And I'm the postgraduate program leader. I deliver one of the courses on the business school programs, the business strategy course. I have had quite a long association with law courses as well. And so I'm very familiar with the content and the structure of law degrees as well. Along with me at the campus in Doha, Mr. Brian Buckley, who's the principal, Russell Williams, who you've already seen, who talks about it, who's our dean. We have Dr. Tatiana Gladek, who is the head of discipline of business and management, and Dr. Gary Mulholland, head of discipline, accounting, finance and economics. And we, of course, this shows we have a range of postgraduate courses we're already delivering. And we've had quite a lot of experience over the last 2 years in delivering these courses in exactly the same way as they are delivered at Aberdeen directly on the campus. One of the things obviously the university has a lot of experience of is understanding what is required for learning at postgraduate level. And it's probably worth thinking about the structure of the courses, and each course is made up of a number of credits, and each credit equates to 30 hours of notional effort. So sort of notional being an average student would be expected to spend 10 hours for each of the credits. The majority of the courses you will take as part of the LLM program are 30 credits, so that means 300 hours of total effort. Now that total effort includes the time you spend in lectures, the time you spend in any seminars, but most importantly, it's the time you spend on focusing on self-study. You know, studying as a student at postgraduate level is all about self-acquired learning, and as a postgraduate, you're really expected to take charge of your own study program and be very proactive about that process. So the campus in Doha has a lot of support facilities, and we have a lot of support facilities that you'll find out about later. But each of the postgraduate programs is made up of a total of 180 credits. In the case of the LLM in International Commercial Law, this is delivered over a 2-year period. And each cohort, by cohort, these are the people you will study with directly who are also studying for the postgraduate program LLM, is capped. And this is the purpose of capping, is to allow for a really high level of interaction between yourselves and each other, your fellow students, and with the teaching staff who come and deliver the program from Aberdeen, as well as the teaching staff who are based here on campus in Doha. So if we look at a little bit at the course content, I've met a lot of people, and I'm sure some of you who are listening now are people I've met and had a discussion with. We start the program off with a non-credit bearing course, Critical Legal Thinking and Scholarship. And what we mean by non-credit bearing, this is not a formally assessed part of the program. In other words, you don't take an assessment that counts towards your final degree. However, it's a really important part of setting the foundation, setting the principles under which you'll study, understanding the nature of how the program will be delivered and assessed, understanding how you will interact with staff. And so it's the starting point that everyone will go through that brings you up to the same sort of standard and sets you right for your further study. We then have international sale of goods, 30 credits, corporate governance, 30 credits, and I think Professor John Patterson is going to talk a little bit more about corporate governance in a minute. We have corporate and international perspectives on company law, international arbitration law, and each of these courses are 30 credits, and they will be delivered in an intensive style, and I'll say a little bit more about that in a minute. The dissertation is the final element of your program of study, and this is 60 credits. This is a largely independent piece of work where you will be supported by supervision. You'll be very well prepared, but it's an area where you have a choice about the focus of your study. So if we look at the what the course is, what will that mean for you? In normal times, the students come in to campus and they interact directly with staff face to face, and we're hoping that will be the case in the future. Obviously, while we are suffering under the COVID-19 crisis, we have had to adapt our methods, and we have continued during this period to mimic the face-to-face delivery with online platforms, collaborate like this one, slightly different, a more structured environment. But you will experience, whether it's face-to-face or via a medium like this, a mix of lectures, tutorials, and workshops. As I said earlier, postgraduate study is all about self-acquired learning. It's about learning from each other, your fellow students, learning from the staff, learning from your own reading, and learning from your own experience and the experience of others. So lectures are part of the process of transferring knowledge. Tutorials have mixed activities, group work, case studies, presentations, and there will be actually fewer than this. This is slightly incorrect, this slide. It's not 40 students, it will be about 24 students maximum on the law programs. We allow up to 35 students for postgraduate, the business and commercial programs, but only 24, I believe, for this program. A vital part of the postgraduate study will be your part as a team, taking part in a team and interacting with team members. And for this to be possible, we are planning at the beginning of the course that's coming up that we will make the maximum use allowed by the government, ensuring that we look after everybody's health, both the teaching staff and the students. We'll make as much use as possible of face-to-face delivery. So we are planning in the upcoming period to have face-to-face sessions, probably with social distancing, but this will be seen as an opportunity for you to get to know your fellow students and to be sort of inducted into the process of study. Okay, now if we look in a little bit more detail at the typical structure of a course, each course is split into various periods or phases, if you like, and we start off with a preparation period. During the preparation period, you will have access to online material. In most of the cases, you will have access to reading, either electronic or a combination of electronic and paper-based reading. The university library is very well equipped and is supported by professional librarians who will be there to help you get access to reading and support material. But the preparation period, normally 2 weeks, is a period where you prepare for the intensive period which takes place during the delivery weeks. Now, typically what we expect for the LLM is the staff will come, the professorial staff will come in from Aberdeen University. They will come to Doha and they will deliver face-to-face in 1 week intensive sessions. So without ignoring COVID for a moment, that would normally, what your experience would be, you would come in on a Sunday and you would be here Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday and Thursday evenings from 4 until 8:30. So you would, in that period, you'd interact directly with the teaching staff and with your fellow students and take part in a range of activities. During the COVID crisis, we simulate that but through an online media, Collaborate, which is very similar to what you're experiencing at the moment, but more interactive in that you can be set up in groups and teams, and you can work on common projects, teamwork, etc. So it's as close as we can make it to face delivery. Finally, you have an assessment period. This is normally 2 weeks, and during this period you will be focused on preparing yourself and preparing the assessed pieces of work. Now, for the LLM, I'm sure none of you would be surprised to know that an LLM is very much about being able to present your arguments, being able to rehearse and produce your evidence, and be able to convince people about your perspective on a particular situation. So the assessment period will be interactive, but you will be led through that, and you will have time to do the assessment. The assessment methods, I actually noticed a couple of people had asked a question about how courses were being assessed, and they're assessed through mixed methods: essays, presentations, role play, group work, project work. All of these might be used, and if you go on to the University of Aberdeen website, you look for the common grading scale, there's extensive detail about how the grading process works, and the range of grades that you can be awarded. It's based on an alphanumeric system and grouped into 7 bands, each with an associated grade point for each grade. Once you've completed the whole course, then the overall award for your degree is based on a mean of the grades awarded for each separate course. So that's essentially how the whole process works. I think we're now ready, and of course we'd welcome any questions that you want to pose, but we're ready now to move on to Professor John Patterson, who is going to lead you through the next part of this presentation.
Thanks very much, Rulian, and thank you also for the opportunity to be involved today. So, as Russell said earlier on, the teaching at Aberdeen is frequently research-led. In other words, the people who are involved in the teaching are actively involved in research in the same area. And the presentation I'm going to give you today, which is entitled The 21st Century Corporation, Shareholders, Stakeholders and Social Responsibility, touches on things that I'm involved in teaching in and indeed in research as well. In fact, I'll have a deadline for a paper in a related area towards the end of this week, so I've got a few things to catch up with. In any case, let me just dive right in. So clearly, corporations are fundamental to the functioning of the global economy, and you can hardly move in terms of opening the news media of any kind without running into corporations and their influence. Now, one of the issues that we touch on a great deal in company law, corporate governance and other corporate related subjects is, who do corporations actually owe duties to? And this is a really long-standing question in company law. It was raised many, many years ago, and the disagreements that were evident right at the beginning of this debate persist into the present day. So it's a long-standing and controversial issue. So let's move on to the next slide. So here is this debate that I hinted at there. It dates back to 2 articles in the Harvard Law Review, a leading academic journal, back in 1932, and it's called the Beryl-Dodd debate. And the question was raised by Merrick Dodd, very famous company law professor, and he asked the question, for whom are the corporate managers trustees? And another way of saying that is, in whose interests must companies be run? And as lawyers, we might change that to whom do the directors owe a duty? Okay. Now, Dodd answered his own question by saying, in actual fact, these duties are owed to the community as a whole. In other words, companies have to be run with a view to the benefit they bring to the community as a whole. Now, Adolf Berle, by contrast, in responding to that paper, disagreed and said, no, the duty is only to the shareholders. Now, those are diametrically different positions on paper, and that debate goes on to the present day. However, although it's a debate in academic circles and indeed in policy circles, in many cases the answer is clear in terms of what company law in many jurisdictions has to say. The focus really is on shareholders. Okay. Now, we might think, well, does it really matter that we dig too deeply into this? After all, corporations, as I said at the beginning, are vital for the global economy. They provide goods and services which are valuable to society. We can't get by without them. They provide employment, and of course they generate profits and then pay taxes. So governments need the revenues that companies generate because those revenues are the foundation for tax, which allows states then to function. But sometimes, of course, corporations don't quite behave in the way that we would perhaps hope. So sometimes we see them dominating the global economy, or at least parts of it. Their influence seems to be getting greater and greater. They provide goods and services which, unfortunately, sometimes as a byproduct, harm communities and the environment. They often are found to be providing employment at below what could be regarded as a living wage. And of course, famously, notably in the digital economy, they don't pay taxes, or some of the biggest ones seem to pay less tax than I do. So moving on, next slide. Now, the question then is, okay, does this mean that the focus that company law places on shareholders, giving them a kind of key priority position in the governance of the company, is that actually the problem? Because we could argue that any action that saves money for the corporation is going to increase profitability and therefore be good for shareholders. What sort of things are we talking about? Well, cutting costs. And sometimes, of course, those costs can be cut in relation to systems and processes which are all about protecting communities and the environment, or indeed employees. Paying low wages increases profitability. Paying less tax increases profitability, which can be distributed to the shareholders. Well, the law seems to agree on this focus, because if we look at company law, corporate law in many jurisdictions around the world, what we find is that the key focus of that law is on what are the duties that we impose on directors and what rights do we give to shareholders. And even if other parties are mentioned, well, it's very seldom the case that they have any rights equivalent to shareholders. It remains the case that shareholders in many jurisdictions possess the key rights to be able to monitor and discipline the board of directors. Now, the question then is, should we worry about this? Because after all, company law is not the only game in town. If we're worried about communities and the environment, if we're worried about the adverse effect that the activities of some companies may have on communities and the environment, well, as lawyers, we can point to other dimensions of law. We've got environmental law, we've got consumer protection law, tort law, product liability, the list goes on and on. There are all sorts of ways in which the law can regulate and compensate where things go wrong at the hands of corporations. If we're worried about employees, well, we've got employment law, both in its statutory and its contractual forms. We've got health and safety law, and again, we could extend that list quite considerably. And if we're worried about non-payment of tax, well, again, we've got revenue law, tax law, and it seems to be the case that really it comes down to the willingness of legislatures to impose appropriate taxes and for the relevant tax authorities to actually enforce them. So maybe we don't really need to worry about these things at all. But I guess the question is there actually a better way of doing this? Should we be, as it were, making up the deficits by relying on these other areas of law? Or would we better have a company law that reflects a wider set of duties? Should we try and prevent companies from acting in ways which are problematical by extending the range of duties that they are exposed to? Well, there are a couple of options that come to mind in the academic literature, the policy literature, and indeed increasingly in actual areas of legal development. So we've got stakeholder theory on one hand, and we have the concept of corporate social responsibility on the other. So let's start with stakeholder theory. Well, although there are many, many varieties of stakeholder theory, I guess the key thing about all of them is that they see the company as something much more than just the directors and the shareholders. All of these theories, in one way or another, recognizes other constituencies as being part of or having a key role to play in the functioning of the corporation. It could be employees, it could be suppliers, customers, communities, others as well. The question then is, of course, how we actually integrate those other constituencies into the company's governance. If all we're focused on is directors and shareholders, it's relatively straightforward, albeit that most corporate laws are pretty extensive. But if we were to try and give other constituencies the same rights as shareholders, then things are going to get complicated. How on earth do we make that work in practice? And that remains a key challenge for stakeholder theory. Now, corporate social responsibility is something that's been talked about for many years, but is now something that is very actively discussed. You'll see it pretty much in the news media every day now for a variety of reasons. And this is the idea of the company as a good citizen. Now, to think about what this means in practice, we, as good citizens, comply with the law. But we do more than that. We do things that are actually beyond what the law requires us to do. So, for example, we do things that are costly to us in terms of time or effort or even money, which we're not legally obliged to do, but which help other people, and which we therefore think are good for society generally. So the question then is, can we expect the same thing of companies? Because what if shareholders object to things that are costly and which therefore impact on profitability of the company and the profits that can be distributed to them? What if, in other words, corporate social responsibility runs contrary to the duties that we see embodied in corporate law? Let's have the next slide. So, to answer these questions, we need to first need to ask a couple of other things. Why is company law the way it is? Why does it give priority status to shareholders? Next slide. Well, to answer that question, increasingly, the law actually points to economics. So both Rulian and Russell have pointed to interdisciplinarity as a key feature of the sorts of things we do at Aberdeen. And as lawyers, we frequently find that we work with a variety of other disciplines in order to make sense of the complex world that we live in. So in company law, we're frequently working alongside economists, and economists have tried for many years now to provide us with answers to why we see companies and company law having the shape and form that they do. So I've got a few options here. There are others as well, but this is just a little selection that we could look at. We have economists who point to the idea of team production, others talking about agency costs, yet others talking about asset specificity, and others still pointing to property rights, and all of them putting forward economic answers as to why it is that routinely we see shareholders being given priority status in company law and having the key governance rights compared to anyone else. Now, very briefly, because I'm not going to turn this into a very lengthy course on economics, but just a quick overview of some of the insights that the economists can bring to us. If we go back to the previous slide, sorry, I haven't quite finished yet. So team production, we've all, I guess, had the experience of working in teams. And I guess if I could see you and see your reaction, you might agree with me that sometimes when we're working in teams, there are team members who pull their weight and do what they're supposed to do, and others who we might regard somewhat as free riders. So in the company setting, we know that working as a team allows us to generate exponentially more than if we simply added the outputs of individuals. But how do we ensure that we do not have team members who are shirking? Well, the economists say that we can deal with that metering problem, in other words, measuring the actual effort that everyone is putting in and rewarding them accordingly. We can deal with that by appointing a specialist monitor and giving that monitor a series of rights which allow him or her to make sure that the metering problem is solved. Now, as it happens, the economists then list rights which coincide very nicely with the rights that we find shareholders possessing in company law. So actually, the team production sort of characteristic of companies can be a way of explaining why we give shareholders top-level monitoring rights. What about agency costs? Well, that sees shareholders as principals, directors as agents. The economists for a long time have pointed to the fact that as soon as you have that kind of agency relationship, you're going to have costs formed from the principal's monitoring costs, the agent's bonding costs, and residual losses. So then we can explain company law as basically setting out rights and duties to minimize agency costs. We could go on. I won't go on at great length about this, but the key thing is that as we dig down into these theories, what we find is that none of them actually gives us a watertight explanation for why shareholders are special. In fact, we can actually see some of them pointing to the possibility that other constituencies ought to have equivalent rights. And it's quite interesting to see in those circumstances, the economists kind of stopping short of following through to the logical conclusion of their analyses. So if we can just go back to that previous slide again, just very briefly, the issue then is, where do we go next? Where do we go if it turns out that even what seems to be the most robust analysis of the company doesn't provide us with a watertight answer to why things are the way they are, and may even point to the need for things logically to be quite different, for other constituencies to have more of a role in the governance of companies, to be the beneficiaries of duties as well. Next slide, please. Okay, so what about corporate social responsibility? We can certainly expect companies to be good citizens. That would be a nice thing. But if we have to force them to behave in a certain way, is that really good citizenship, or is that just regulatory compliance? So when we think about things in that light, it turns out that CSR is not really a solution to many problems, though it's usually not adding to the problems themselves. Next slide, please. So in terms of the future, despite the fact that I and many others have been working in this field for many decades, we still don't have definitive solutions to many of these problems, and yet we're confronted with global problems in which corporations have a key role to play, which look as if they will require us to rethink potentially radically the functioning of companies. So we've got to think about the position of other stakeholders in relation to shareholders. We've got to think about the rationale for allocating rights and duties in the way that we do. What are the limits of corporate social responsibility? What are the limits indeed of regulation itself? What are the interactions of regulation with company law, among many others? Next slide, please. So these are the kinds of issues that we talk about in the LLM, in particular in my course, but related issues are talked about across the program, because it's all about understanding the law as it is, but also why it is that way. Because only if we have that depth of understanding can we contribute to shaping its future direction. And after all, as both Rulian and Russell have adverted to, it's people like you who will be future leaders. Many of you are perhaps already in management positions. And we want our graduates at Aberdeen to be in a position not to be passive recipients of future law reform, but to be the kind of people who actually shape the future direction of law reform. So thank you very much for your attention. And I think now I'm going to hand on to Khaled. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Professor John. Assalamu alaikum. Good evening, everybody. My name's Khaled. I'm the Student Outreach Officer and Course Advisor for the University of Aberdeen. I'll be telling you what's next once you want to apply to the university. So for new applicants, we have the following documents which you need to submit along with your application. Now, if you need an application form, you can always email us, contact us, we can send it over to you. And if you have any information about, or sorry, any questions about any of the documents that you need, please contact us, we will get back to you. So for the personal statement, it should be no longer than a page, 2 recent work references, and like it says, copy of passport and ID, and the rest, letter experience from your workplace.
Go on, Khalid, we can hear you. Go on, please.
Sorry about that. My computer went off. So, after that, for the students who submit their applications, this is what would be happening after you received your offer. Next slide, please. So the first thing you would do is you would accept the offer. So if you get an email today saying that you have an offer for the university, you need to reply within 2 weeks accepting it. But due to the current health situation we've actually delayed that till the 9th of August. So you have up until then to give us your acceptance or not. Your offer will be sent via email, and you can reply to the offer and accept it by replying via email. You would then need to pay the deposit. So once you've accepted the offer, you would have to pay part of the deposit fee, which is 5,000 Riyal, and it will be taken from your main tuition fees. Thirdly, it's to satisfy conditions. So for those who've got conditional offers, you would need to actually meet those conditions to join, whether it be IELTS examinations, a letter of experience, university degree, or anything like that. You would need to satisfy it before the 27th of August. And finally, you need to pay the tuition fees after you finish satisfying the conditions before you start your course. So you can pay it as a first instalment, or you could pay it as the whole for the whole course. Thank you very much. It's Russell. We're looking forward to seeing you in September and October.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Khalid. Thank you very much, everyone, for paying attention. I'm wondering whether we have any questions about the talk that we've had from John Patterson. We've had quite a few questions about the sort of the operation of the LLM, but any questions about the talk? If anyone wants to pop a question in the chat room, please go ahead. Before we get there, I've got a question for John. John, you were talking about how this topic helps lawyers shape legislation, but I was thinking that many applicants, of course, are working in a commercial law department. What they also need to know is how that understanding will help them perhaps preempt legislation or fit their company better to hard law or perhaps softer governance that's out there in CSR terms. I don't know what you're thinking about that is. What do you think?
That's a really good point, Russell. And I think, you know, what we expect from our graduates is, of course, that they, by the end of their time with us, will have all the kind of technical competence that one would expect emerging with a master's degree from a good university. But I think, you know, a key feature of our research-led teaching is that ability to kind of get behind the surface, get below the surface. Because particularly what I find when I'm speaking to, for example, employers, whether it's big law firms, corporations, whatever it might be, they're looking for people who, of course, are technically competent, who are problem solvers, but who are also aware of the sort of broader dynamics of the market, of the policy process, of the political situation. And it seems to many of us that, you know, we've lived through some fairly interesting times over the last 10 or 20 years. If we talk about the energy sector, if we talk about the corporate sector, we've seen some really quite unprecedented developments. And these, of course, have had impacts on commercial viability, on the operation of contracts, on the way in which governments seek to intervene in the operation of the market. And it seems to us to be really important that if you like, the actors in the market are in a position to contribute to the way in which these things evolve. It's very easy for political actors to react in a kind of knee-jerk way to global developments, and it's very important that whichever dimension of the market you're involved in, whether it's commercial, whether it's state sector, private sector, whatever it might be, that you're able to contribute meaningfully to the policy debate in order that we make the best choices that we can. One of the things that I'll be teaching on the course in the near future, I hope, is exactly examples of where, for very understandable reasons, changes have been made to governance arrangements in a variety of countries, which have really been suboptimal and often had unintended consequences. And if there had just been a little bit of a period of reflection, if there had been an engagement with expertise from the market, from academia, from the commercial sector, things might have gone in a different way. So that's one of the reasons for the teaching in the way that we do, and for developing the particular skill set that we do.
Okay, yes, I agree, John. Actually, while you were talking there, I was thinking that of the brief conversation that we had before the webinar started about the former MBA student that's working with you now, and how this is a topic area of decommissioning oil rigs in the North Sea. And of course, there's a legislative framework there which government has imposed to protect the rights of citizens to have a clean environment after the energy industry is reaching its end of lifespan. But it hasn't legislated for new opportunities which now exist that didn't exist when it set the legislation out. So we can repurpose some of those oil fields, the high pressure, high temperature ones, for geothermal energy. But the legislation at the moment isn't quite there, and companies are working out how to navigate that to realise that opportunity. And actually the government is also beginning to consider how what could have been a cost for them and a liability for them could actually still be an asset. I don't know if you can say a few more bits on, because that's quite an applied aspect of this.
Absolutely, that's extremely applied, Russell. It's a very, very good example. And as you say, it's one of our MBA graduates who has come from industry, has experience in oil and gas as a geoscientist, expert in geothermal, and has seen an opportunity for repurposing late life assets, possibly also new developments as well, but certainly repurposing late life assets with a geothermal dimension. And as you rightly say, even if the decommissioning legislative and regulatory regime is open to the idea of reuse, it's still rather limited in the sense that it had not foreseen geothermal as a possibility. So one of the things that we're working on is looking at how such a new development might fit within current arrangements, and offering some suggestions to policymakers about how they might most efficiently and effectively then develop the regime to accommodate this kind of development.
Yes, and of course that development will be a collaboration across lots of particular parties. So the sort of legal writing of who's got responsibilities and risks is one of the key elements of getting one of these partnerships to develop a new technology and realise the potential.
Absolutely. So as soon as we have this kind of opportunity, if we look at it from a purely technical point of view, this looks absolutely fantastic. Why wouldn't we want to do it? But of course, our job as lawyers is to think about where are the risks, where are the liabilities, where will they fall? We have to think about advising our client in the best possible way. So it is a particular challenge, and it's one that mirrors a few similar challenges in the late life of a hydrocarbon province. And along with colleagues, we're working on a variety of different dimensions at the moment, all of which are geared towards, as it were, de-risking as far as possible these arrangements, thinking about centralized solutions that share risk as far as possible, and allow these innovations to come forward to contribute to the energy transition. One of the other issues you mentioned at the beginning, one of the core themes of the university's 2040 strategy.
Yeah. Okay. Very, very interesting. Rulian, I don't know if you've got any observations before I summarise some of the questions that have come into the chat bar.
Just a brief observation, actually, sort of just to mention the fact that we've had some really excellent applications, and really hopefully we'll meet some of you who I met during the application process. But I see that there's a question being put up about that process. And I know many of you have already applied. Once you've applied for the course and you get an offer, then you're given the period that Khaled was talking about to post your acceptance. Once you've accepted, there is another stage, and that stage is the process of registration. So you will be taken through, Khaled and the team will take you through the process of registering, and during that time you become a University of Aberdeen student. And as a University of Aberdeen student, you then get access to all of the online facilities, as well as access to the library and so much of the campus that we are allowed to make accessible to you. So that is the sort of next stage to the application process.
Yep, thank you, Rulian. And once they're registered as a student, there's a range of other induction events that will help them to use the technology that we use, the virtual classroom, etc., etc. Let me quickly go through some of the questions that we've had. Some of the questions were answered in the talk, obviously. Somebody asked about how many courses there were. There were four credit-bearing talk courses. Each of those will have 2 intensive blocks of teaching, and the intensive teaching blocks run from Sunday to Thursday, 4 to 8:30 in the evening. They're separated out, but for each of them, there are 2 intensive week blocks of teaching there. In addition to the four talk courses, you do a dissertation. It's a substantial piece of work with a supervisor from Aberdeen. And before any of that begins, though, we've got this non-credit bearing important legal skills workshop that runs at the very, very start of the program. Okay, somebody's asked about when will the program start. It's going to start in October, but as Rulian just mentioned, we'll be registering you as Aberdeen students, inducting you, looks like in the month of September, and then we're having that skills course in October with the first talk course running before the December break. Let me carry on with questions. Somebody's asked about, we have more options available in Aberdeen compared to AFG. We do. It's because the numbers studying Aberdeen are substantially larger, and we're able to offer a few electives, a few options, but we won't be offering those electives here. And we've carefully distilled the program down to a core set, given set of courses. I'm going to carry on through some of the questions. Is there an attendance requirement? The attendance requirement, yes, exists on the intensive taught blocks, those 2 Sunday to Thursdays in each course. You need to be there in the class with the professor from 4 till 8:30. Obviously, there's breaks. That's important. There's a few oral assessments as part of the assessment portfolio, so you'll be given a time to do that, or you'll be able to select a time to do that with the professor. And that's about making the case for a legal point or some other question that they're posing for you. Completing the MBA will take just under 2 years. Yeah, sorry, completing the LLM will take just under 2 years. Okay, somebody's asked, will we be on the new campus? Yes, we are developing a new campus. The target date for us to be on the campus is 2022. All of your teaching is likely to be on the current Doha campus. So, still, I'm scrolling through. Somebody's asked about when we're welcoming. It'll be in September. We're going to send out lots of correspondence on the run up to the start of the program. Somebody's asked about the common grading scale. This was the alpha numeric scale that Rulian mentioned, from 0 to 23. It's basically an A, B, C, D passing bands, and anything below D is non-passing. And I've put a link in the chat which will take you to an explanation for the common grading scale. If you just go to the university's website and do in the general search bar CGS, it will pull up the common grading scale for you to look at. Okay. Just seeing what other, somebody's asked about the question that Rulian answered about acceptance. Okay, somebody's asked about the tuition fee. It's 105,000 Qatari riyals. duration of the course, yes, of each course, yeah. Each individual course, not the program, will run sort of over 3 months, because remember, you have some prep. You come in for the intensive first week, you will do something after that intensive first week, and then you'll do a little bit more prep and you'll come in for the second intensive week, and then you'll do some more work in your assessment. So each course is likely to take around about 3 months, and those 4 taught courses will make up the taught element before you start your dissertation. Okay, so I think that's all of the questions that we've had. Rulian, a question that we often get is, do you have to have a law degree to get on the program? And we have a perspective on that. Would you like to articulate that?
Yes, we've actually had a number of applications, some from very senior individuals with extensive experience of working in commerce and working with contracts, for example. Some of the applicants have extensive experience of negotiating contracts, being part of the process of putting contracts together. So when we look at the requirement, is we do not have a requirement you must have a first degree in law. However, we do expect people to have significant commercial and contract experience, working with contracts, potentially negotiating contracts, that type of background. And where you do not have a degree, it would almost certainly would have an interview and an opportunity to discuss that. We remember with the first non-credit bearing course, there is an opportunity to look at that course, and if after completing that course you really decided this is definitely not for me, it's not the right thing for me, then there would be an opportunity to withdraw from the course at that stage. So it's a fairly low risk way of coming in to see whether the course would work for you, and also getting an idea of how the study would take place. But so finally, just answer that question, there isn't an absolute requirement for a first degree in law. However, we do look very carefully and look for experience in legal areas that would make it relevant for you.
Thank you very much, Rulian. I'm just going to now give any of my colleagues an opportunity just to say something, or if they'd like to add any observations. Does anyone want to say anything? No? Okay. Well, thank you very much, everyone, for attending the LLM International Commercial Law webinar. We're happy if you've got further questions that you want to raise outside of this or following on from this, please email them in to recruitment admissions. They will find a person that can answer your question. It will either be Rulian, or perhaps we can direct it back to Professor Patterson, who's the Aberdeen campus program leader for international commercial law, and certainly one of the key faculty that you'll meet when you join the University of Aberdeen. I wish you well. Thank you again for your attention, and have a good evening.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Look forward to seeing you in September and October.